The rain drummed against the windows of the Meridian Research Center as Dr. Kai Patel made his final rounds for the night. Lightning flashed across the Montana sky, illuminating the empty halls of the Atmospheric Research Facility. At 32, he'd already earned a reputation as one of the world's leading experts in atmospheric anomaly detection, though tonight he felt more like a security guard than a scientist. Thunder cracked overhead as Kai passed the main sensor array room. He paused, frowning at an unusual reading on one of the monitors. The equipment was detecting some kind of crystalline formation in the atmosphere, but that was impossible given the current conditions. He stepped closer, adjusting his glasses as he studied the readout. Another flash of lightning, and the power went out. Emergency lights buzzed to life, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Kai reached for his phone to call maintenance, but stopped when he heard something that didn't belong. A sound like wind chimes coming from the observatory dome. Following protocol would mean calling security. Instead, Kai found himself walking toward the sound, drawn by scientific curiosity and something else he couldn't quite name. The observatory door was ajar, though he distinctly remembered locking it earlier. Inside, rain poured through the open dome, creating a curtain of water around the main telescope. And there, hovering in the air like suspended starlight, was something impossible. She was humanoid in shape, but her body seemed to be made of living crystal, transparent in some places and opalescent in others. Rhythms of light pulsed through her form like blood through veins. Her eyes, when they met his, were swirling pools of silver. "Please," she spoke, her voice resonating like crystal glasses singing. "Help me hide." Before Kai could respond, the being's light flickered, and she collapsed to the floor with a sound like breaking ice. Without thinking, Kai rushed forward, kneeling beside her. Up close, he could see hairline fractures spreading across her crystalline skin. "What are you? What happened to you?" he asked, hands hovering uncertainly over her form, afraid to touch and cause more damage. "My name is Zora," she whispered, her voice growing weaker. "I am Crystallix, from the Luma system. The Collector, he must not find me." Her form flickered again, like a dying light bulb. Kai's mind raced. The Crystallix were supposed to be myths, stories told by deep space explorers about a race of beings made of living crystal who could manipulate light and energy. Yet here was one, dying on his observatory floor. "What do you need? How can I help?" Zara's silver eyes focused on him. "Light. Pure light. Your sun would be ideal, but..." She glanced at the stormy sky above. Kai jumped to his feet. "The quantum laser array. We use it for atmospheric testing, but it produces pure, coherent light. Can you move?" Zara tried to rise but collapsed again. Without hesitation, Kai carefully slid his arms under her crystalline form. She was surprisingly light and warm to the touch, like sun-heated glass. He could feel the vibrations of her failing energy thrumming against his skin. The laser lab was 2 floors down. Kai took the emergency stairs, knowing the elevator wouldn't work during the power outage. Each step caused Zara to chime softly in pain, the fractures in her form spreading. By the time they reached the lab, her light had dimmed to barely a glimmer. The backup generator kept the laser array operational. Kai laid Zara on the testing platform, his hand shaking as he calibrated the equipment. "I've never done this with anyone alive before. I don't know if..." "Trust your instincts," Zara interrupted softly. "You have kind eyes, Kai Patel. I sensed that when I chose this place to hide." Kai didn't ask how she knew his name. He activated the laser array, and pure, coherent light bathed Zara's crystalline form. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her body began to absorb the light, the fractures healing as she drew in the energy. Her opalescent skin began to glow from within, colors shifting like the aurora borealis. When the process finished, Zara stood up, restored to her full radiance. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with features that seemed both alien and beautiful. "Thank you," she said, reaching out to touch Kai's cheek with fingers that felt like warm silk. "But I'm afraid I've put you in terrible danger by coming here." "The collector you mentioned. Who is he?" "Voraxian the Infinite. He collects unique beings from across the galaxy, keeping them in suspended animation as living art pieces. My people are nearly extinct because of collectors like him." Her form shimmered with what Kai realized was anger. "I escaped during transit, but his hunters will track me here." As if in response to her words, a deep thrumming sound penetrated the building, different from the thunder above. Zara's light dimmed in fear. "They're here." Kai moved to the lab's control panel, initiating emergency lockdown. "Well, they can't have you." He met her silver eyes with determination. "I don't know much about intergalactic politics, but I know enough about freedom to know you deserve yours." A small smile played across Zora's crystalline features. "You would risk everything for someone you just met." Maybe it's time humans took a stand about what's happening out there in the galaxy. Kai checked the security feeds, seeing strange shadows moving in the parking lot. "Besides, I've spent my life studying the extraordinary. I'm not about to turn my back on it now." The lockdown doors sealed with a heavy thunk. Kai knew it wouldn't hold them for long, but it might buy enough time to figure out an escape plan. He turned to find Zara studying him with an unreadable expression. "Your species is fascinating," she said. "So fragile, yet so willing to face impossible odds." "Yeah, well, being stubborn is kind of our thing." Kai managed to smile despite his pounding heart. "Now let's figure out how to get you out of here alive. My car's in the underground garage, and I know these mountains better than any alien hunter." As they heard the first sounds of the entrance doors being breached, Kai and Zara shared a look of understanding. Whatever happened next, both of their lives had changed irreversibly in this moment of first contact in the rain. The mountain roads were treacherous in the storm, but Kay drove with the steady nerves of someone who'd navigated them countless times. Beside him, Zora's crystalline form pulsed with weak light, her energy depleted from their narrow escape from the facility. They'd barely made it to his old jeep before the hunters breached the building's defenses. "How did you mask your energy signature?" Kai asked, trying to keep her talking, conscious. "When you first arrived, I mean. Our sensors barely detected you." Zara's silver eyes flickered. "We crystallics can enter a dormant state, appearing as ordinary crystal formations, but it drains us significantly." She turned to look out the window, her form reflecting the lightning that still crackled overhead. "I can't maintain that state again without rest." Kai checked his rearview mirror for the 100th time. No sign of pursuit yet, but he knew better than to think they'd escaped clean. "I have a cabin," he said. "Off the grid, solar-powered. We can." His phone rang, cutting him off. Dr. Diana Walsh, his department head. Kai connected it to the car's speaker. "Kai, thank God. Are you all right? The facility's sensors went crazy, and then we lost power. Security found signs of a break-in." "I'm fine, Diana," Kai interrupted. "Just got out before the storm got worse. Listen, I might not make it in tomorrow, with the roads." "This is bigger than work, Kai." Diana's voice turned serious. "There are government agents here. They're asking about unusual atmospheric readings, about you specifically. What did you see tonight?" Kai's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He glanced at Zara, who had gone completely still, her light dimmed to near invisibility. "Nothing unusual," he lied. "Just the storm." A long pause. "Kai, if you're in trouble, I can help. You know that, right?" "I know, Diana. Thanks. I'll call you tomorrow." He ended the call, a knot forming in his stomach. "She suspects something," Zora observed quietly. "Diana's been my mentor for 6 years. She wouldn't." Kai stopped as his phone buzzed with a text. "From Diana. They're tracking your phone. Run." Kai yanked out the phone's battery and threw both parts out the window. "Change of plans. We need to assume they know about the cabin." Zara's light pulsed with worry. "You're losing everything because of me." Your work, your home. Hey. Kai took one hand off the wheel to touch her arm, marveling again at the warm, silk-smooth texture of her crystalline skin. Some things matter more than research grants and comfortable lives. The ghost of a smile played across Zora's features, sending ripples of color through her form. But before she could respond, a piercing white light flooded the car from above. A ship dropping its cloaking field. Kai swerved hard onto a logging road, branches scraping the Jeep's sides. The ship's searchlight followed them, and now they could hear the thrumming of its engines. They're hurting us, Zora realized aloud. There will be others ahead. An energy blast struck the road in front of them, leaking a smoking crater. Kai spun the wheel, but the Jeep's tires lost traction on the wet ground. They slid sideways, then began to roll. Time seemed to slow. Kai felt Zora's arms wrap around him, her body beginning to glow intensely. As the Jeep tumbled down the mountainside, she encompassed him in a cocoon of crystalline light. They hit something hard, and everything went dark. Kai awoke to the sound of rainfall and breaking glass. He was lying on wet ground, surrounded by the wreckage of his Jeep. Everything hurt, but he was alive. Impossibly alive. Zora knelt beside him, her form flickering weakly. She transformed her entire body into a protective shell around him during the crash, absorbing the impact. The effort had clearly cost her severely. "You saved me," Kai whispered. "You saved me first." Zora helped him to his feet. Her touch left traces of luminescence on his skin, like stardust. "But I'm afraid I don't have enough energy left to do that again." The ship was still hovering above, but it hadn't fired again. Instead, floodlights snapped on, illuminating the crash site in harsh white light. Figures began rappelling down from the vessel. Humanoid shapes in sleek black armor. "Voraxian's elite hunters," Zora said, her voice tight with fear. "They won't kill me. I'm too valuable. But they'll have no such restrictions with you." Kai looked around frantically. They were in a narrow valley, steep cliffs on three sides. The hunters were between them, and the only clear path out. But behind them, the old mining tunnels, he said. "This whole area is honeycombed with them. If we can reach that opening." He pointed to a dark gap in the rock face. "Your body is damaged," Zora protested. "I can sense your broken ribs, the internal bleeding. Then we better hurry." They ran as the first energy bolts sizzled past them. Kai's entire body screamed in protest, but adrenaline kept him moving. Zora's light illuminated their way, though it grew dimmer with each step. They reached the tunnel entrance just as something struck Kai in the shoulder, spinning him around. The pain was immediate and intense, like being stabbed with an icicle. He stumbled, but Zora caught him. Together they plunged into the darkness of the tunnel. Behind them, they could hear the hunters' boots on rock, their artificial lights cutting through the gloom. But Kai knew these tunnels connected to a vast underground network, if they could just get deep enough. "Kai," Zora's voice was barely a whisper now, "I can't maintain my form much longer. The crash, and now this darkness." He pulled her closer, supporting her weight even as his own strength faded. "Then we find you some light. Whatever it takes." His free hand touched the wall, feeling for familiar markers. "I won't let them take you." Zora's light flickered once more, then stabilized slightly. She pressed her crystalline lips to his forehead, leaving a mark that glowed faintly. "My people have a saying," she murmured. "The brightest stars burn in the darkest spaces." Together, they descended deeper into the earth, their combined light growing fainter as the hunters' beams drew closer. But in that darkness, something else was growing stronger, a connection neither of them had expected to find, and a determination to protect it at any cost. The question was, how long could they keep running, and what price would they ultimately have to pay for freedom? Deep in the mining tunnels, time lost all meaning. Kai and Zora moved through the darkness, guided only by her fading light and his knowledge of the underground network. His shoulder throbbed where the energy weapon had struck him, and each breath sent daggers of pain through his broken ribs. They'd managed to lose their pursuers in the maze-like passages, but Kai knew it was temporary. Zara's weakening glow would eventually lead them straight to her, if she didn't completely fade first. "Wait," Kai whispered, recognizing a particular junction. "There's something ahead you need to see." He led her down a narrow passage that opened into a vast underground cavern, and there, scattered across the walls and ceiling, were thousands of crystals that glowed with a faint natural bioluminescence. Zara gasped, her form brightening slightly as she absorbed the ambient light. "How is this possible?" "We discovered this chamber years ago," Kai explained, leaning against the wall for support. "The crystals contain a unique form of bacteria that produces light through chemical reactions. We've been studying them, trying to understand." He trailed off, watching in wonder as Zara moved to the center of the cavern. She raised her arms, and the crystals responded, their light intensifying. Energy flowed between them and her crystalline form, creating a spectacular display of shifting colors. When she turned back to Kai, her silver eyes were bright again. "These crystals," she said, voice filled with emotion. "They're not just bioluminescent. They're crystallic seeds, planted here millennia ago. My ancestors must have visited Earth." Before Kai could process this revelation, a new voice echoed through the cavern. "Fascinating, isn't it?" They spun to find Diana Walsh standing at the entrance, holding an alien weapon. Behind her were two figures in black armor. "Diana," Kai breathed. "How could you? How could I not?" She stepped forward, her face illuminated by the glowing crystals. "Do you know what Varaxian offered me? Not just money, but knowledge. Access to technology beyond our wildest dreams." She gestured at the cavern. "We've been studying these crystals for years, never understanding their true nature." But he knew. He's been tracking Crystallix artifacts across the galaxy for centuries. Zara moved protectively in front of Kai. "You would betray your own kind for his promises. Varaxian is a collector of living beings. He keeps us in stasis, displays us like trophies, a small price for the advancement of human knowledge." Diana's eyes gleamed with fervor. "Think bigger, Kai. Think of what we could learn." "I am thinking bigger," Kai said, straightening despite the pain. "I'm thinking about right and wrong, about freedom, about what makes us human." Diana's expression hardened. "Then you'll die as naively as you lived." She raised her weapon. But at that moment, the cavern erupted in blinding light. The ancient Crystallix seeds responded to Zara's distress, releasing a surge of pure energy that sent Diana and the hunters staggering backward. "Run." Zara grabbed Kai's hand, pulling him toward another tunnel. Behind them, energy bolts crashed against crystal walls, sending showers of sparks through the air. They emerged into a different chamber, this one occupied by modern mining equipment. Kai's heart leaped. He knew where they were now. "The service elevator," he panted. "It leads to..." A blast caught him in the back, sending him sprawling. Through blurring vision, he saw Zara turn to face their pursuers, her form blazing with borrowed power from the ancient seeds. "Enough." Her voice resonated through the chamber like a crystal bell. "You want to see what a Crystallix can do? Let me show you." She began to glow brighter than Kai had ever seen, her body becoming almost too brilliant to look at. The hunters raised their weapons, but their shots seemed to pass right through her now translucent form. Then the light pulsed outward in a wave of pure energy. Electronic equipment sparked and died. The hunters' armor systems failed, leaving them blind and immobile. Zara knelt beside Kai, her light dimming rapidly after the display of power. "Can you stand?" He nodded, though every movement was agony. Together, they made it to the elevator. As the ancient machinery groaned to life, they could hear Diana's voice echoing up from below, ordering the hunters to pursue. "That trick with the light," Kai said as they ascended. "Pretty impressive." Zara's form flickered weakly. A desperate gamble. I've depleted almost everything I had left. She touched his face gently. And you're dying. Just a few scratches. He tried to joke, but coughed up blood instead. The elevator shuddered to a stop at the surface level. They stumbled out into what appeared to be an old processing facility. Moonlight streamed through broken windows. The storm had finally passed. There's a ranger station, about 2 miles north, Kai said, fighting to stay conscious. They'll have medical supplies, communication equipment. A massive shadow passed overhead. Through the broken roof, they could see a ship far larger than the Hunter vessel, a cruiser-class spacecraft, its hull gleaming like polished obsidian. "Voraxian," Zara whispered. "He's come himself." Kai pulled her behind a pile of rusted machinery as floodlights began to sweep the building. "There has to be a way out. Something we haven't thought of." Zara's light pulsed with sudden determination. "There is, but you won't like it." She pressed her crystalline hand over his heart. "I'm sorry, Kai, for bringing this chaos into your life, for making you care about a dying star." "Hey," he caught her hand, marveling even now at how it felt like captured moonlight. "Best chaos I ever signed up for." She smiled, and for a moment her light blazed as bright as it had when they first met. Then she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Kai felt a surge of energy flow through him, healing his wounds, restoring his strength, and draining the last of her light. "No," he gasped as she pulled away, her form growing dim and brittle. "What did you do?" "Gave you a fighting chance." Her voice was barely a whisper now. "Run, Kai. Find others who will help. There's a resistance out there, fighting against collectors like Voraxian. Tell them what you've seen. Tell them about the seeds in the cave. Earth is part of this fight now, whether it wants to be or not. I'm not leaving you. You already saved me, more than you know." Her form began to crystallize completely, becoming like the ancient seeds in the cavern. "You showed me that some things are worth any price." The last thing Kai saw before her consciousness faded was her smile, preserved in living crystal. Then the floodlights found them, and the next phase of the war began. 6 months had passed since Kai lost Zora. He sat in a dimly lit underground bunker, surrounded by an unlikely alliance of humans and aliens who had all lost something to Voraxian's obsession with collecting the universe's rarest beings. The crystallized form of Zara rested in a specially designed containment unit nearby, bathed in concentrated light. Her surface occasionally flickered with tiny sparks of consciousness, but she remained dormant, locked in the same state as the ancient seeds they'd discovered in the cave. "The attack begins at dawn," said Commander Rixus, a towering Andromedian whose metallic scales caught the low light. "Our intelligence suggests Voraxian's main collection facility is vulnerable during the solar storms on Centauri Prime. If we're going to free the captured specimens, this is our chance." Kai studied the holographic plans floating above the table. After escaping from the mining facility that night, he'd been contacted by the Resistance, a loose network of species fighting against collectors like Voraxian. They'd been watching Earth, aware of the ancient crystallic seeds, but unable to act without drawing unwanted attention. The facility's power core. Kai pointed to a pulsing node in the hologram. "It's the same crystal-based technology as the seeds, isn't it?" Rixus nodded. "Voraxian's entire empire is built on stolen crystallix technology. Their ability to store and channel pure energy made them irresistible to collectors. That's why they were hunted to near extinction. And why Zara sacrificed herself to save me," Kai added quietly. He touched the glowing mark on his forehead. The last trace of her kiss still lingered there, a constant reminder of what he was fighting for. "The energy she transferred to you," said Dr. Lysandra, their chief scientist, her multifaceted eyes gleaming. "It's not just healing energy. It's a key encoded with all of her knowledge about crystallix technology. She knew what she was doing, Kai. She made you a weapon." Kai had spent months training with Lysandra, learning to channel the strange energy that now lived inside him. He could sense power sources, interface with crystal technology, even generate small bursts of pure light. But the cost had been high. Every time he used these abilities, he felt Zara's absence more keenly. "The assault team is ready," Rixus continued. But getting to Varaxian himself, he trailed off, mandibles clicking in concern. "Leave that to me." Kai stood, his hand resting on Zora's crystalline form. "I got a score to settle." Hours later, as twin suns rose over Centauri Prime, Kai crouched behind a crystal pylon in Varaxian's facility. The Resistance's attack had drawn most of the security forces to the outer perimeter, leaving the inner sanctum surprisingly accessible. The collection chamber was exactly as Zara had described it. A vast circular room filled with suspended animation pods, each containing a unique being trapped in eternal stasis. The walls thrummed with crystal energy, powering the stasis fields. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Kai spun to face a tall, elegant figure dressed in flowing robes that seemed to absorb light. Varaxian's skin was pure white, his eyes deep pools of swirling darkness. "My life's work," Varaxian continued, gesturing at the pods. "Preserving the universe's most extraordinary specimens for eternity. Your Crystallix friend would have made a magnificent addition." "They're not specimens," Kai growled. "They're living beings. You're not preserving them, you're killing them." Varaxian smiled, revealing teeth like black diamonds. "And what would you know of preservation, human? Your kind measures time in such tiny increments. I am offering them immortality. You're offering prison." Kai felt Zara's energy stirring inside him, responding to his anger. "And your collection ends today." He thrust his hand toward the nearest crystal pylon, channeling pure light energy into the facility's power network. The crystals began to pulse erratically, their harmony disrupted by the foreign frequency. Varaxian's smile vanished. "Impossible. How are you?" "A gift," Kai said through gritted teeth, pushing more power into the system. "From someone who taught me that freedom is worth any price." The collector raised his hand, and dark energy crackled between his fingers. "Then you'll die as she did, your potential wasted." The blast of darkness struck Kai full in the chest, driving him to his knees. But he held the connection to the crystal network, feeling it begin to overload. Above them, the stasis pods began to flicker. "You fool," Varaxian snarled. "You'll kill them all." "No," Kai gasped, his body burning with light. "I'm waking them up." The mark on his forehead blazed like a star. In that moment, he felt Zora's presence stronger than ever, guiding him, showing him how to channel the energy just right. The crystal network screamed with power. Varaxian launched himself at Kai, darkness trailing from his robes like smoke, but he never reached his target. The overloading crystals exploded in a cascade of pure light, and the collector's own technology turned against him, trapping him in a prison of his own making. As the light faded, Kai found himself surrounded by the awakening forms of Varaxian's collection. Beings of all shapes and sizes, some so strange he could barely comprehend them, all free for the first time in years or centuries. The resistance forces burst in, led by Rixus, ready to evacuate the freed prisoners. But Kai barely noticed them. His attention was fixed on the small crystal he pulled from his pocket, a piece of Zara he'd kept close to his heart. It was glowing. "Hold on," he whispered, cradling the crystal as chaos erupted around him. "I'm bringing you home." The battle was won, but the real fight, to revive Zora and protect Earth's ancient Crystallix heritage, was just beginning. And this time, Kai wouldn't have to face it alone. The ancient crystal cave beneath Montana's mountains hummed with power. Hundreds of free beings from Varaxian's collection gathered around a central platform, where Zara's crystallized form lay surrounded by the glowing seeds of her ancestors. Each being contributed their unique energy: light, heat, radiation, even forms of power Kai had no words for, all focused on reviving the last free Crystallix. "The convergence is reaching critical levels," Dr. Lysandra announced, her compound eyes reflecting the swirling energies. If this doesn't work, it'll work, Kai said firmly. The mark on his forehead pulsed in sync with the ancient seeds. After 3 months of preparation, studying both the seeds and Varaxian's technology, they finally discovered a way to potentially reverse crystallization stasis. Rixus placed a metallic hand on Kai's shoulder. Remember, once the process begins, we cannot stop it. The energy requirements. I know the risks. Kai stepped onto the platform beside Zora's still form. The crystal fragment he'd carried since the battle glowed brightly in his palm. Everyone ready. The assembled beings moved into position, forming a circle of light and energy. Kai took a deep breath and placed his hands on Zora's crystalline surface. The power she'd given him months ago stirred beneath his skin. "Let's bring you home," he whispered, and opened himself to the energy. It was like being struck by lightning. Power coursed through him from every direction, using his connection to Zora as a conduit. His consciousness expanded, touching the ancient memories stored in the seed crystals. He saw the crystallics in their prime, a civilization of living light. Saw their discovery of Earth, the planting of the seeds as a backup should disaster strike. Saw their gradual hunting and capture by collectors across the galaxy. And he saw Zora, her essence preserved in the crystal, waiting. "Wake up," he called to her through the maelstrom of energy. "It's time." The crystal beneath his hands began to warm. Fractures appeared, leaking brilliant light. The assembled beings poured more power into the convergence, their combined energy reaching impossible levels. Then something went wrong. The crystal network started to overload, wild energy arcing between the ancient seeds. Warning cries went up from the gathered beings as the cave itself began to shake. "The power level is too high," Lysandra shouted. "The crystal matrix is becoming unstable." "Kai, you must break the connection," Rixus called out. "The backlash will kill you." But Kai held on, feeling Zora's consciousness stirring just beyond reach. "I'm not losing you again," he gritted through clenched teeth. The mark on his forehead burned like a supernova. In that moment of crisis, he understood what he had to do. The power she'd given him wasn't just a tool or a weapon. It was a piece of her very essence, kept safe until this moment. Kai stopped trying to channel the external energy and instead turned inward, offering up the light he carried all these months. "Take it back," he whispered. "Take it all back." The mark on his forehead exploded with light. He felt the power flowing out of him, into the crystal matrix, completing a circuit that had been waiting 6 months to close. His consciousness began to fade as the last of Zora's gift left him. The last thing he heard was the sound of crystal singing. Kai awoke to a sensation of warmth on his face and the feeling of fingers running through his hair. He opened his eyes to find himself cradled in Zora's arms, her crystalline form glowing with renewed vitality. Around them, the cave's crystal seeds pulsed with gentle light. "You impossible human," she said softly, her silver eyes swirling with emotion. "You nearly died. Again." "Worth it," he managed to whisper. "How long was I out?" 3 days. She helped him sit up slowly. "The others have been taking shifts, watching over us. They're calling it the Great Revival. Apparently, the energy released didn't just restore me. It awakened all the ancient seeds. New crystallics are forming for the first time in centuries." Kai looked around in wonder. The cave walls were alive with growing crystal formations, each one containing the spark of a new consciousness. "So what happens now?" he asked. Zora's light rippled with amusement. "Now, my dear scientist, we have work to do. Earth has become the new cradle of the crystallix race. We'll need to establish relations with your governments, create sanctuaries for the growing seeds, protect them from others like Varaxian. We." She touched his cheek, leaving traces of luminescence on his skin. "Unless you have other plans." Kai caught her hand, marveling that he could touch her again. "I think studying the revival of an ancient crystal-based species could be an interesting research project. Might even be worth a few papers. And the fact that you're hopelessly in love with one of your research subjects. That too." He pulled her closer, their foreheads touching where his mark had been. "Though I should warn you, I have a reputation for getting too personally involved in my work." Zara's laugh echoed through the cave like wind chimes, stirring the newly awakening seeds. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Above them, the ancient crystals sang their approval as light and shadow danced across the cave walls. A new chapter was beginning, not just for them, but for two civilizations learning to grow together. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other collectors trembled at the news. The Crystallics were returning, and this time they weren't alone. The end.